My wife tried to destroy me and steal everything, but I managed to turn it around. I never imagined my life would turn into a silent battlefield. What seemed like just a turbulent phase in my marriage turned into something that completely drained me. My name is Leandro, I'm 38 years old, and I've always considered myself a balanced, focused, and strategic person, but I never imagined my own home would become a territory of manipulation and betrayal. I worked as a financial analyst at a mid-sized company, living a seemingly stable routine with goals, responsibilities, and a marriage of over 12 years that on the surface seemed peaceful. Vanessa, my wife, has always been a beautiful, persuasive, and, I thought, affectionate woman. But in recent months, I began to notice strange subtleties, venomous comments masked as playfulness, calculated looks and attitudes that made me uncomfortable. At first, I tried to ignore them, thinking perhaps I was overreacting or projecting insecurities. But a strange feeling began to grow inside me, a constant discomfort in my stomach and sleepless nights, as if something was wrong and I couldn't close my eyes without thinking about what was really happening. The breaking point came one Friday afternoon. I received a call from Mateus, a mutual acquaintance, who began hesitantly speaking about something that left me frozen. He said he knew of Vanessa's plans for divorce, but that wasn't all. She was planning to seize all my assets, and Igor, a cold and calculating man, was involved. My heart raced, and I felt a mixture of anger, disbelief, and fear. My hands trembled, the floor seemed to disappear for a moment, and I had to lean on the table to keep from falling. I felt betrayed in a way I never imagined. That sense of security I'd always had, the confidence that my life was under my control, evaporated in seconds. I tried to think rationally, but my mind was spinning in circles. How could someone I'd loved for years do something so planned and cruel? It was the first time I realized that it's not just about money or possessions, but about dignity, respect, and control over one's own life. For days, I couldn't sleep well. Every thought about Vanessa and Igor was accompanied by a wave of anger and despair that seemed to engulf me. I began to question everything. My ability to judge people, my own intelligence, whether I truly knew anyone or if my entire life had been an illusion. Anger consumed me, but the fear of losing everything paralyzed me. I found myself alone, talking to my mother, Gloria, who became my safe haven. She had always been practical and sensible, but in that moment she became more than that. She was the anchor that kept me from sinking. We talked for hours on the phone, reviewing documents, possibilities, every detail. My body trembles, my mind doesn't stop, and it's difficult to explain to an outsider what it's like to feel simultaneously betrayed and powerless. That mixture of adrenaline, anger, and physical pain seemed to consume me, but it also lit a spark. I needed to act before it was too late. The fear of losing everything made me realize I needed to think strategically, not emotionally. I couldn't react impulsively, even if I felt the urge to confront Vanessa or explode in anger. Every move needed to be calculated. That's when I began researching legal ways to protect my assets, consulting lawyers, and analyzing every contract and financial document I had. My body was tired. Sleepless nights left me exhausted, but my mind was working at top speed. I discovered that transferring my assets to a trust could make any financial maneuvering impossible for her. This idea became my focus, the light at the end of the tunnel that made me feel like I still had control over the situation. The feeling that I could finally act gave me a strength I didn't know I had. I still felt anger, pain, and humiliation, but now there was something tangible I could do. It was a silent struggle, but a struggle I needed to win. As I planned each step, I began to realize the emotional impact of it all. Every manipulative message, every fake smile from Vanessa, every contact with Igor, it was a test of my patience and ethics. My body reacted with constant muscle tension, insomnia, headaches, and a permanent sense of alert. I found myself remembering happy moments from my marriage, trying to understand how everything had fallen apart so calculatedly. It was painful to recognize that the person I'd shared years of my life with had such cold plans against me. But this pain began to transform into motivation. I realized it wasn't just about material possessions, but about proving to myself that I could survive betrayal and emerge stronger. I decided I would no longer be a victim, that my dignity and control over my own life were more important than any direct confrontation. The battle had begun, and I needed to be prepared, mentally and emotionally, to win without losing. The essence of who I am. The day I decided to take concrete action was a mixture of fear and relief. I felt my palms sweat as I signed the documents transferring all my assets to the trust, and with each signature, my heart beat faster, as if my entire body knew something irreversible was happening. I spent the entire morning breathing deeply, trying to control my anxiety, while memories of past arguments with Vanessa flooded my mind. Every manipulative smile, every broken promise, every belittling word seemed to hang in the air, reminding me that I had been blind for too long. But now there was a glimmer of hope, the feeling that I could finally regain control of my life. My body was tense, my mind on high alert, but a strange sense of power began to grow within me, not aggressive, but firm and necessary. For the first time, I felt that my intelligence and patience could overcome manipulation, and that I didn't need to resort to anger to protect myself. This realization gave me the strength to carry on, even with my heartbreak. When Vanessa found out, her reaction was exactly as I imagined, surprise followed by calculated indignation. Every word she said seemed designed to hurt, but I stood my ground, observing every gesture, every intonation, trying to understand her intentions without getting drawn into the drama. I felt a mixture of relief and anxiety, knowing my actions had worked, but I also knew the psychological warfare was just beginning. For days, every meeting, every phone call, every interaction was fraught with tension, and my body responded with insomnia, tightness in my chest, and a constant feeling of alert. But at the same time, I noticed small, silent victories. Her frustration was evident. The control she had previously exerted over me was beginning to falter. It was at that moment that I realized the battle would not only be financial, but emotional, demanding patience, ethics, and self-control. I needed to be ready to resist provocations and manipulations while maintaining my integrity. My mother became an even more important support during this time. Gloria had always been practical, but now I depended on her advice, her calm, and her objective perspective. I called her several times a day, sharing every detail of the silent battle unfolding, and she helped me process feelings I could barely name: anger, fear, humiliation, and even shame. My body reacted in strange ways: sleepless nights, muscle tension, frequent headaches, but talking to her was like a cold shower that woke me up and reminded me I wasn't alone. I began to realize that emotional strength wasn't the absence of fear, but the ability to act even when fear was present. Each conversation with her reinforced my resolve not to be destroyed by Vanessa's pride and manipulation. I needed to rebuild myself emotionally while protecting my assets, and my mother was the foundation that made that possible. During this period, I faced moments of intense doubt. There were days when I considered giving up, giving in to provocations, responding with anger and revenge. But each time I did, I remembered the feeling of total loss I felt at the beginning. That visceral fear of being destroyed drove me to continue, to think before acting, to find solutions that were intelligent, ethical, and effective. I began keeping a journal, noting every encounter, every word, every reaction Vanessa had, analyzing patterns and strategies. This documentation process helped me realize that patience was a powerful weapon, that acting impulsively could cost me more than I was willing to lose. My body still reacted with anxiety, but my mind began to feel clearer, more strategic, and more grounded. I was learning that emotional reconstruction is a slow process full of ups and downs, and that each small mental victory was a step toward regaining my dignity. With each challenge, the anger and pain subsided, giving way to a renewed sense of control. I felt my body relax a little more, my heart slow down, and my mind become clearer. I realized that victory wasn't just financial, but also how I maintained my integrity, patience, and ethics, even in the face of constant manipulation and provocation. I began sleeping better, eating healthier, and resuming activities that brought me pleasure, like morning runs and reading that distracted and strengthened me at the same time. Each small step was an affirmation that I could survive betrayal, manipulation, and the attempt at emotional destruction. This period was crucial to my rebuilding, as it taught me that true strength is quiet and strategic, and that it is possible to win without losing the essence of who you are. The internal battle was being won as much as the external one, and this gave me a sense of hope I hadn't felt in months. There was a day when I felt like everything was about to fall apart again. Vanessa had arranged a casual meeting to discuss divorce matters, but her every word felt like a trap. I felt my stomach tighten, my chest ache, and for a few seconds I considered running away, escaping the tension that drained me. But I took a deep breath, remembering the patience I'd been building and the trust that protected my assets. I realized that my strength lay not only in the documents I had signed, but in my ability to control my emotions. Her every gesture, every cool smile, every comment disguised as irony, was now closely observed, as if I were deciphering codes. It was exhausting, but also liberating to realize that, even in an environment fraught with manipulation, I was able to maintain my emotional balance. The physical tension was still present, shoulders tense, jaw clenched, but the sense that I would not be defeated began to replace the initial fear. For the first time, I felt the battle was being fought on my terms, not hers. Amidst all this, I clearly remember the impact Mateus had. He began revealing details I hadn't known, revealing the full extent of Vanessa and Igor's plan. I felt a mixture of relief and outrage. Relief at finally having clarity, outrage at realizing that so many weeks of manipulation could have led me to rash decisions. My mind whirled, trying to process everything without exploding in anger. I spent nights replaying every conversation, every gesture, trying to understand how someone could plan so coldly. At the same time, I began to realize how much I was rebuilding myself emotionally. My body still felt the constant tension, but my mind was firmer, more strategic. I didn't need to prove anything to Vanessa or Igor. I just needed to protect my life and my dignity. With every step I took, I felt my confidence grow, even if small insecurities still lingered like ghosts from the past. The rebuilding process was painful. For weeks, I felt a mixture of anger, sadness, and a persistent fear that I might lose everything emotionally. Every call from Vanessa was a test of patience, every message a reminder that I was still dealing with someone who knew my weaknesses and was willing to exploit them. There were times when my hand shook as I wrote an email, moments when I had to physically distance myself to keep from screaming, to keep from giving in to the urge to retaliate. But deep down, I realized that my emotional rebuilding depended on precisely this: controlling my reaction, maintaining ethics and mental clarity, even when my body was screaming for an explosion. I began to record my emotions, identify triggers, and recognize patterns that made me feel powerless. This daily effort became a psychological workout, strengthening my resilience and making it easier to face each manipulative attack without losing my integrity. At the same time, small victories began to appear. Vanessa, realizing she wouldn't be able to access her assets, began to change tactics, trying to destabilize me emotionally. But each provocation was now analyzed and responded to strategically. I was no longer a passive target. My actions were conscious, my responses considered. My body still reacted, tightness in my chest, fatigue, tension, but my mind felt strong. This sense of control gave me the confidence to resume life decisions that had become stagnant, personal projects, friendships, hobbies that I had neglected. Each small action reminded me that I could rebuild not only my financial security, but also my emotional life. The feeling of autonomy and power over my choices was refreshing and motivating. Amidst all this tension, I realized something essential. True victory wasn't in defeating Vanessa or Igor, but in finding myself again, in learning to trust myself again. Each step of the process of emotional protection and reconstruction taught me that strength isn't about crushing others, but about protecting one's own dignity, even in the face of the cruelest manipulation. I felt my body gradually relax, my mind clear, and my anger transform into energy to create my own stability. A psychological battle continued, but I was no longer a hostage to it. I was learning to value myself, to trust my decisions, and to build a safe space for myself, away from manipulation and fear. And it was at that moment that I realized that overcoming suffering isn't instantaneous, but a daily process made up of conscious choices, patience, and courage. The turning point came one unexpected afternoon, when Vanessa tried once again to confront me, this time with veiled threats and attempts at emotional manipulation. My chest tightened, a mixture of anger and adrenaline coursing through my veins. But this time, instead of reacting impulsively, I took a deep breath and simply observed. My body was still on high alert. Cold hands, tense shoulders, clenched jaw. But my mind was clear, analyzing every gesture and every word. For the first time, I felt a concrete sense of inner power. I was no longer hostage to the emotions she was trying to provoke. I began to realize that my rebuilding wasn't just financial or strategic, but primarily emotional. I could face someone manipulative and emerge unscathed, maintaining my integrity and peace of mind. The feeling of control was addictive, and for the first time in months, I felt truly free from the clutches of manipulation. During this period, my personal life began to expand again. I resumed hobbies I had abandoned, like running and reading, and this began to bring a sense of pleasure and physical relief I hadn't felt in a long time. Every step, every activity was like a silent affirmation that I could rebuild myself even after suffering betrayal and manipulation. The painful memories still surfaced, but now they were merely reflections of what I had overcome, no longer chains that bound me. My body reacted differently. Muscles relaxed, tension lessened, and my heart beat slower. I realized that my personal growth was directly linked to this resumption of activities and self-care. I was finally rediscovering my worth, learning that my happiness didn't depend on Vanessa or any other manipulative person. The process of emotional reconstruction required daily discipline. I continued to record my thoughts, analyze patterns of manipulation, and strengthen my confidence. Each victory, no matter how small, became a reminder that I could win not only financially, but especially in the emotional battle. Moments of doubt still arose, but now I could recognize the triggers and choose to act consciously. I felt my body reacting more calmly, less tension, deeper sleep, more controlled breathing. I began to realize that my strength came not from fighting Vanessa, but from fighting for myself. This shift in perspective was crucial for me to maintain serenity and clarity, even when she tried to provoke me. Over this period, I realized that patience and strategy became my greatest weapons. Every gesture from Vanessa that would have previously left me frustrated or desperate was now simply an opportunity to practice self-control. My body still felt the effects of past stress, slight tremors, shoulder pain, neck tension, but my mind was strong and disciplined. I began to plan my future more clearly, setting personal and professional goals that didn't depend on anyone else. I realized that the manipulation that once seemed overwhelming was now just a distant memory, something that taught me to be stronger and more aware of my own decisions. Each step in this process brought me closer to true emotional freedom. The impact of this reconstruction began to be reflected in my personal relationships. I was able to connect more genuinely with friends and family, expressing my feelings and seeking support when needed. I realized I had regained my self-confidence and the ability to trust the right people again. My body was responding better, my mind was clearer, and my heart felt less heavy. The feelings of fear and helplessness that had plagued me for months began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of quiet. In pride, I had survived manipulation, betrayal, and psychological warfare without losing my essence. For the first time, I felt I had not only survived, but had grown and become stronger. The last real confrontation with Vanessa was almost anticlimactic. I didn't need to prove anything. I didn't need to yell or react angrily. She finally realized she could no longer manipulate me, that every attempt at intimidation or persuasion had evaporated in the face of my patience and strategy. I felt an intense physical relief, as if a huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders. My body relaxed completely, my breathing deepened, my heart finally slowed. For the first time in months, I felt a genuine sense of emotional freedom. That silent victory wasn't about humiliating or defeating another person, but about proving to myself that I could maintain my integrity, my peace of mind, and my life intact, even in the face of so much betrayal and manipulation. It was liberating to realize that I was whole, intact, stronger than before. Over time, my life began to reorganize itself in a healthy way. I returned to investing in personal projects, reconnected with friendships and activities that had been forgotten, and most importantly, learned to value my own choices. My body, which for months had reacted with tension, insomnia, and pain, began to recover. I slept better, felt less tightness in my chest, and my energy gradually returned. Each small daily achievement became a reminder that I was capable of rebuilding myself even when everything seemed lost. The feeling of power over my own life was intense and renewing, and I realized that this inner strength was something no one could take away from me. The battle had been difficult, but each step of the silent war strengthened my resilience and confidence. Today, I can look back on that time with gratitude and learning, despite all the pain I felt. The feelings of betrayal, the psychological manipulation, the constant tension, all of this was transformed into lessons that shaped who I am today. I learned that true strength isn't about retaliating with aggression, but acting with clarity, patience, and ethics, even when faced with people who try to bring us down. My story isn't about revenge, but about recovery, dignity, and resilience. I realized that protecting one's emotional life is as important as protecting one's material possessions, and that it's possible to escape abusive or manipulative situations without losing one's true essence. What impacted me most was realizing that my emotional freedom was in my own hands. No gesture, no manipulative word, no attempt at intimidation could harm me if I was conscious, prepared, and firm in my decisions. Every step I took, every strategy I applied, every emotionally balanced choice brought me closer to finding myself again. And little by little, I learned to trust again, first in myself, then in the right people. Today, my heart still bears scars. It's true, but they are reminders of overcoming, not defeat. Each painful memory serves only to remind me of my strength, my patience, and my ability to rebuild. If I could leave one message for someone facing manipulation, betrayal, or a period of intense pain, it would be this. There is a path, even if it's narrow and full of obstacles. It's possible to protect yourself, rebuild yourself, and regain control of your life. It's neither quick nor easy, but every step, no matter how small, is a victory. Today I can say that I survived and grew, that I learned to recognize my strength and my worth, and that there is hope even in the darkest situations. I learned that dignity, patience, and ethics are powerful weapons, and that protecting your own mind and heart is the most important victory of all. This is the lesson I carry with me every day, and the certainty that I can face any challenge while keeping my essence intact.